Hey everyone, today we're going to be going over an ICP crash update. I was out of town over the weekend, so I wasn't able to really stay too up to date with everything. I was out at a wedding and I actually just got back, and so if it looks like I'm tired, it's because I am. But I want to go over where we're sitting with ICP, what could be next, what's happened, all of this type of stuff, give you a little bit of an update, and we'll go right on and get into it because there is, of course, a lot to talk about because it was a crazy couple of days. So let's go jump right on in talking about the crypto bubbles. We can see here pretty green day on the crypto bubbles, but again, this is some recovery after an otherwise really brutal handful of days. I did a quick update while I was actually out at the wedding, explaining kind of all the things that had happened, and we did have $20 billion liquidated in a single day, which is like almost an order of magnitude more than what we've seen ever before. So really crazy stuff. But I want to go over kind of what we're seeing here, because you can see on the day ICP up about 4%. We're seeing a little bit of a bounce here. But if we do go to the week, you will see it's super red basically for everything. It has been a really tough week. Now, I think there's kind of a couple different ones. You actually can see Tau is up 20% on the week, Zcash up almost 60, and some of these kind of smaller ones here up even more than that, and even like BNB. So there were a couple like very isolated winners. You could see during the liquidity push or the liquidation push, you could see here, this one actually only went down about 30-ish% top to bottom. And I think the worst one I've seen is actually Story Protocol. We could see Story Protocol went from about $8 down to about $4. I actually think it bottomed out at about $1 and then came back up. You can see here it's about $6, almost $7 at this point. So a really wild month, or a wild week for the crypto world, and that's something we actually have not seen before. Now, of course, here ICP you can see down 22% on the week, 27% on the month, and then of course 55% on the year. So it has been, of course, a really rough year for ICP. And in my opinion, I actually haven't seen that much bearish sentiment or bearish news being talked about for ICP. And I think a lot of that is because it's already had a pretty rough year and a pretty successful year in crypto. And so I think all of the people who were kind of fair weather fans of ICP are long gone. I think only the most committed are still here in the ICP ecosystem. And so I do think that does give a little bit of a it gives a little bit of some goodwill, I would say, especially when we start to see some moves like we saw. Obviously, ICP did have a pretty strong move to the downside, but if you look kind of top to bottom, it's only about 20% down, which is actually in line or maybe even slightly less than the rest of the market. So I do think that there is something to be said about really having only the most hardcore ICP fans left. Obviously, this is not the way that you grow into a top 10 project or anything like that, but it does kind of put a cap on the downside, at least in my opinion. Of course, price still can go down. I'm not saying that we are at a bottom and will never get any lower. But also, if you were able to catch kind of the wick when ICP was dropping, you may have been able to get some ICP prices that we haven't seen in years and years, possibly even kind of before that. So we'll go take a look at that here in a second. The first thing I did want to take a look at, though, is the market overview to show you kind of where we're sitting in the market. We can see that the market average RSI is actually at the very bottom end of neutral, so not quite a weak market, but we are definitely very close there. And then we also can see in the crypto fear and greed index, we are firmly planted in fear. I thought that we might be able to get some extreme fear days, but I don't think have seen that over the past week. Yeah, it's only been in fear. We kind of were up dancing between neutral and greed, and then of course when that liquidation wash came through, like almost immediately back into fear. So the other thing I want to show you here is the liquidation map. Now there's a couple things. We'll actually probably go to the detailed liquidation map because I want to show all three time frames. But at least for right now, if we look at open interest and volume, we can see open interest took a massive hit, dropping by almost $20 billion in the span of just a couple of days here. So that is, of course, something that is very aggressive that we'll have to kind of keep an eye out for. We'll actually shorten this up a little bit so we can get a bit more detail. Actually looks like it only tracks it week by week, but we had pushed an all-time high on open interest. We are, of course, now well below that. We can see the volume, though, between both of these weeks was pushing highs. So let's go and take a look at the liquidation maps, and we can see what we're talking about here. So first off, we will just look at Bitcoin because, again, Bitcoin is what moves the markets. But as this relates to ICP, you will see, because we're going to talk very specifically about why all of this stuff with Bitcoin and Ethereum particularly relate to ICP so directly, because right now I do think very much of what ICP is doing is basically just a byproduct of the wider market. And so until the wider market starts to get a little bit more alt friendly, I don't expect us to see too much happening from ICP, which is kind of why I'm kind of starting with the liquidations to give us a good sense, because we do need to start to see price go back up, and we need to start to see price get a little bit more frothy and get some more rallies and not have such a damaging liquidation wash like we just saw over the past couple of days. I do think that this is something it's probably going to take several weeks to kind of recover from, just because there's so much fear and kind of residual kind of stress in the market from what has just recently happened. It's going to take some time to get people to kind of forget about that. So what we can see here on the 1 day is actually about kind of even here. We do actually have a decent bit of downside liquidity here, where we could potentially see a further push down. However, you will very quickly see, as we start to expand out on the day or the time frame of the exchange liquidation map, that it very, very quickly has a very strong incentive to move back to the upside. Here we could see only about 5.3 billion on the 7 day. If we were to go essentially all the way down to 102,000, only about 5.3 billion would be liquidated. Whoops. But we could see most of that is kind of within like the 110, like 109, maybe 110 range to up to current, right? So we could see a relatively short-term move down. Again, maybe kind of another like liquidation wick, push a lot of this, liquidate a lot of it, and then come all the way back and start to see that move back to the upside. You can see here at the very top, if we were to head back to 127, now that is an all-time high, but even if we were just to get back to like the 126,000 range, which we were at just merely a couple weeks ago, that would be about $12 billion in liquidations to be had. And then of course, if we look at the 30-day, we're going to see something similar here, about 15.3 billion all the way to the top. But again, it's still a pretty hefty 9 billion, almost 10 billion to the bottom here. Now again, most of it being had around this $108,000 range. So you do have to be very, very careful. We might see that kind of like last push or so back to the downside, and then we start to see that move to the upside. I do think that there is a lot of people kind of expecting something like this to happen after such a major push to the bottom. Now, of course, it may happen, but also it might not, because people are expecting this. There might be kind of another kind of renewed push to the downside to really start to hamper sentiment and things like that. So we'll have to see. Again, any like short-term moves to the downside, I'm not super worried about. If we do look at the Bitcoin chart, you can see that we obviously had some major moves, and then we had a little bit of a recovery move back to the upside. We'll have to really see where we go here. You can see this is a pretty much like an indecision wick. If we look, there's a lot of price indecision here. We've seen as low as about 113s, and we've seen highs above 116. But right now we're kind of in the middle of both fit, and we don't really know which direction that we're heading. So we'll have to see. There's a ton of indecision, and I think a lot of that is because people don't really know, right? Are we going to see a little bit more of that relief rally? Are we going to come back closer to where we were, or could we see a further push back down to this bottom side and then maybe another run back from there? It's really, really hard to say. If we do look at the ICP chart in specific, we can see a couple of different things. So really, if we're being quite honest, quite bad news. We have fallen out of this range bound channel that we'd been trading in for several months, and we are well below it. I mean, I don't think that this is quite a surprise. We kind of sort of faked out right here, and then with this kind of massive liquidation event, it just really crushed us right out of it. You could see the low actually getting as low as $1.16. Now, unfortunately, I was not around. As I mentioned, I was at that wedding, but I was not around to pick up any of this at these super low rates, which is slightly unfortunate. But I mean, even still, at $3.61, potentially a good buy. But overall, if I was picking up ICP in the $1 range, I definitely would have been buying more. As many of you do know, I'm currently in a holding pattern for ICP. I'm not really looking to buy anymore, but I'm also not looking to sell either. So we'll just have to see, kind of which direction we go. If we start to come back down and maybe we get into the mid to low twos, I might buy some more. We'll have to see. But at least for right now, I am just kind of holding and like I said, not really doing anything too crazy. You can see we are seeing a little bit of some rebounding coming back up for ICP. Now, in order to get these levels of support and resistance, I had to go all the way back to 2023. We have not seen these price levels in a very long time. We actually haven't really even seen some of these sustained price levels below like the high twos. Really, I don't even know if we've ever seen it. Yeah, we've never seen prices that low. So we'll have to see kind of, how price recovers, particularly if we come back down into this kind of high two, even in the low two range, we could be in some trouble potentially. So we'll have to see. But if we can get above at least this kind of high $3 mark, you'll see we're above a decent number of supports. And then ideally, we'd look to be getting back into this range bound trading area. That is what I personally will be looking for. But again, I'm being patient. I'm not doing anything too crazy, just because we do need to really be careful that, if ICP does start to lose some of these supports, we could kind of see it fade away until we really start to see, some major improvements in terms of utilization and actual people using the tech. And until we get there, it may be a little bit of some slow movement. So again, I have long-term bags, I have long-term holds that I'm not looking to touch for multiple years. But if I'm looking to for more of my short-term or swing trading funds, I'm not really looking to touch anything really right now with ICP, but I do think that this will flip at some point in time. Now, I did also want to show you the Crusader signals. We have been using this on several different coins recently, and so I wanted to show you kind of what we've seen recently. It does work best on the 15-minute. I do have the link in the description below to Crusader signals if you are interested and want to just check it out. But it's actually really cool. It will give you buy and sell signals based on price. You can see as we start to see this liquidity wash, we actually did start to get buy signals here. Now, we haven't seen any more recently because I think when we saw this massive liquidation wick, I don't know that really anything was prepared to know how to handle something like this. But now you can see we're definitely in a buy zone. We're actually even lower than when many of these buy signals were going off. The higher the number, essentially the stronger signal it is that it could be a buying opportunity here. Now, again, as you can see, if you would have bought when these signals said to, you would be kind of below your average entry price. But that's just kind of how this goes. Of course, nothing is going to work with 100% certainty. But as you could see prior, this was kind of the bottom of this liquidity zone. So this was actually a pretty good place to buy. I don't think anybody really could have predicted this. And now we'll just kind of see as we go up. And then normally you can see it has sell indicators as well as price starts to get a little bit overextended from kind of where a lot of these liquidity bands are. So again, we'll have to kind of let these things kind of reset a little bit. You can see right now we are getting towards the top of these liquidity bands. So we might be starting to see some sell signals popping up occasionally. It's hard to say for sure. But if you are interested and you want to check out the Crusader signals, again, I do have that link in the description below. Unfortunately, I was not able to do too much trading because, like I said, I was busy with a lot of wedding festivities for a good friend. So again, not would have very happy with my decision because of course life does happen and you can't be stuck in front of a computer all day. But I wasn't able to really open as many trades as I was hoping to when we were kind of in the midst of this liquidity wash, which is really too bad. I do have a couple of Bitcoin positions open. You can see I have one here that is actually in the green, and then I do have one that is in the red. I was kind of opening it before that just major liquidation cascade. So as you can see, I was kind of getting in on the way down, doing a little bit more averaging all the way down. But then when we were kind of at the bottom here, I was unavailable and kind of out of pocket at that point. So overall, kind of the TLDR here is I do think that ICP is in a little bit of a precarious situation. It is showing recent strength over the past couple of days, but we did, of course, have a really punishing sell-off throughout the entire crypto market. ICP down, I would say, less relatively than many of the others, but ICP was kind of already down a lot before that. So we just need to be very, very careful. Obviously, some of the winners here are things like Ethereum, Solana, BNB, Tau. Those are kind of the ones that have shown the most strength. And so with ICP, I'm just going to be kind of watching very closely to see what happens next. Because, of course, we do have, it has been a pretty difficult several months for ICP. And so until we get back in that liquidity or that range-bound trading zone, I don't think I'm going to be doing anything too crazy. But as I did mention in the beginning of the video, I think basically everybody who's not a diehard fan of ICP has left, and so that will, I think, make it a little bit easier to start to reclaim some of these levels. We'll just have to see. But for us to see a major run for ICP, we do need to start to see a lot more kind of alt-friendly environments happening and a lot more people being open to ICP again, which that is just currently not the case. I do think, of course, price changes everything there. So if we can start to see ICP go on a bit of a winning streak, that will change things. So overall, we'll see. Hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, of course, you know what to do. Also, I would love to hear any comments that you have. I'd love to hear, what are your thoughts on ICP? Are you still in it? Did you sell? Did you potentially get liquidated in this most recent liquidity event? What happened? I would love to hear your thoughts. And then, of course, we will have more updates with ICP as we continue along. But at least for right now, I want to get back as I'm getting back in town and just do a quick update on all the insanity that happened. So overall, hopefully you found the information useful. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.